Welcome to this month's webinar. I am very excited. I love this topic. I think it's appropriate for everything that's going on in the world right now. People kind of being afraid of getting sick, people who are still experiencing getting sick. So we're going to talk about different approaches for that. As always, this will be recorded. I will send out a recording link later today, as well as a follow-up handout. So I would definitely make sure to, rewatch this one and definitely send this to your accounts as well, because it's going to be important. There's a lot of saturation in the market now with immune SKUs, and there's definitely a different approach depending on what's going on. So regardless of what's happening and your thoughts and, hopes and dreams about bacteria, viruses, all that kind of stuff, the deal is germs they're everywhere, right? We have to learn to coexist with them. Same thing with bacteria, same thing with viruses. There's really no avoiding it. Even if you want to lock yourself in your house all day and live in a bubble and wear a mask and wear a hazmat suit, there's still bugs and bacteria. And we as humans are actually more bacteria than we are DNA, right? There's a 10-to-1 ratio of bacterial cells to DNA cells in the body. So we have to learn to not only understand our own immune system and what's going on with that, but we have to learn how to adapt and evolve appropriately. So regardless of if you spend $1,000 a month on immune supplements or $0 a month, there are still some basic pillars of health that we should be reminding ourselves and our accounts to be aware of. So nourishing foods, right? Making sure that we're managing our stress, making sure that we're getting some play and movement outside, even though the summer is, over, and sleep. These are going to be the foundations of your health house, right? Those 4 pillars. So we really want to make sure that we're not getting too far away from that, while we're also thinking about what's the best protocol for us. And so I have said this before as well, our body's immune system, it's a team effort, right? It's a whole team of organs and cells and tissues that work together. We have immune cells that circulate throughout the entire body, and they are either embedded in our actual tissues or they're interacting with tissues. So there's no avoiding it. But depending on what's going on and what we've been exposed to, we have different kinds of immune responses in the body. So we have our innate acute immunity and we have our adaptive acquired immunity. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as this webinar goes on. But I kind of like to break it down in a couple of ways, and I'm going to give a couple of different scenarios and ways to think of it. But so I call your innate immunity, this is kind of like the family that you're born with. This is like your blood family. So your innate immune system, this is what you're born with actually, right? Your adaptive immunity, this is something that can actually change as you get older. This is why you might notice that as you get older as well, you get different allergies, or times when you never got sick, you do. But so your innate immunity, that's like your family. They're there for you no matter what. They don't care if you're in a bad mood. If you're acting irrational, they're going to come and they're going to show up, right? And so these are the people that love you and they just want you to feel better. That's what your innate immune system is doing. So this is when we start to have that first responder. This is happening within the first 0 to 4 hours of being exposed to a pathogen. So you might notice things like you're getting more mucusy, maybe you have more saliva, your stomach feels kind of weird, your skin, right? These are all those first, because we have physical barriers of our immune system as well. Then we have our adaptive acquired immunity. So this is that second line of defense. This is kind of like what I call, if you've heard people say it's an acquired taste, right? When people say that, they mean it's because you have to acquire a taste for it over time and more exposure. Maybe you didn't like coffee before and you keep trying it, and over time you're like, this isn't so bad. But just like our innate immune system is like our immediate family, I call our adaptive acquired immunity kind of like making friends as you get older. You're just like, ugh, I don't really want to do this. I don't know how I feel about this person. I don't know their vibe. I don't know what their motives are. But the more and more you hang out with them, you're kind of like, oh, you know what? I remember Sally is really cool and she always knows the best places to go get juices. And Tom is super fun and he's a really great travel buddy. So that's what happens with our adaptive immune system as well, is that over time, the more and more we're actually exposed to different germs and different pathogens, that we remember them, our immune system remembers them, and then it will produce T cells and B cells and memory cells and all that kind of stuff, so we can respond better. So we have that innate acute, right, immunity. It's happening effective immediately. It doesn't care. It's busting down the door. And then we have that adaptive. It's more of a slow boil, right? Takes a little bit longer to kick in, but that's what actually remembers what we've been exposed to. And then there are some people who actually will talk about our biological terrain theory, which I think is actually very interesting as well, because this is, you might know people who they're exposed to germs all the time and they just literally never get sick. Mitch actually, his daughter had COVID and she came home and he didn't catch it, right? But then you also know the people who like they are around one person who sneezes and they're sick for months. So what the biological terrain theory kind of talks about is those who don't get sick as often have a healthier terrain. And now when we're talking about having a healthier terrain, you can go very far down the rabbit hole with this. This can be how stressed your mom was when she was pregnant with you, if you had a vaginal birth versus a C-section birth, depending on what your diet is, genetics, epigenetics, all that kind of stuff, right? So you can kind of go down that rabbit hole if you want. But another way to think about it too, and thinking about how do I build my immune, first aid kit, cold and flu season's coming up, we're still dealing with COVID, like how do I deal with all of this, right? And so it's the same thing if you ever played sports growing up. It's a very different mentality when you're in your preseason versus when it's game day. So preseason, this is what we kind of should have been doing over the past couple of months. It's still, I would say, preseason now, right? Like we're transitioning into cold and flu soon enough, but this is when we're going to start thinking about preventative, right? So we're building up immunity. We're trying to kind of stay well in the first place. We're building that robust immune response. And it's this kind of long-term approach. So just like in the preseason, before game day, you're going to be working on drills, right? Maybe if you play soccer, you're working on footwork or you're practicing dribbling skills. I played field hockey back in the day, right? You're going to batting practice. You're getting reps in. So this is what the preseason is about. Then we have our game day immunity. This is that uh-oh phase. Like you wake up and you're just like, I don't feel good. My tonsils are swollen. I think I have a fever. I don't know what's going on. This is a short-term approach. You wake up, you feel terrible, you want to feel better, effective immediately. Again, just like game day, maybe you're not focusing so much on being in your head about footwork. You just want to go and ground the ball. And so I use this little picture down here from Schitt's Creek. It's like one of my favorite shows. But again, the person who is prepared for cold and flu season, like they're ready. If they're exposed to a germ, maybe they might still very well get sick, but they might recover quicker. Maybe they're not going to get all of the symptoms. Maybe they're not going to be down and out for weeks at a time. And so this is kind of taking that proactive and not necessarily being reactive. And then the person who maybe has waited too long to build up immunity, again, that's when people are going to kind of stay sick for a while. So again, going back to that whole terrain theory, like just like some people are born naturally more athletic, some people just generally have better immune systems, right? Because of our individual genetic factors and lifestyle factors. But there are things that you can do, even if you're not, quote, athletic, to build up your immune system for if you do need to have that game day acute response, right? So we want to start thinking about, is this a preventative immune SKU that I'm working with? Is this an acute thing, and kind of what's happening? And so you guys have probably seen this picture before, but again, the innate versus adaptive immunity. So that innate non-specific immune response. This is if you've been exposed to a germ. This happens a lot as well if you maybe have an allergy to something and like you touch it and then you see your skin actually start to kind of like break out in hives. This happens within 0 to 4 hours after being exposed. So this is like the direct expressway. You're going from A to B, that's it. Adaptive immunity can take a little bit longer. This is like the scenic route. It can take about 4 to 7 days after exposure. So maybe you've been traveling a lot, maybe not now, but in the past, this would happen to me where, I was traveling every other week and then I would get sick, like kind of on my off week, or if you've been around people who are sick. And again, depending on what part of that is being activated, your innate immune response, that first responder who's coming up to the scene of the crime, that's when we have things like, again, our physical, right? We have our physical barriers first. So you might notice things like more mucus being produced. Maybe your eyes are getting teary, you're coughing more, your skin is not looking great. And then, of course, we have things like macrophages and neutrophils. So white blood cells actually start to circulate quicker. And then over time, our adaptive immune response happens. So again, this is why totally avoiding germs and getting rid of all germs isn't great, because we do want to say, oh, hey, I remember meeting you. I remember when I met you, I was sick really bad for the first time. This is what used to happen back in the day when kids would get chickenpox. They'd be like, oh, listen, we're all getting chickenpox. Like, let's do it now. And then later down the road, they don't get it, right? Because their body knows how to deal with it. This is actually how vaccines work, right? Is through that adaptive immune response. And so again, whether we are having an acute sickness or a chronic sickness response, we have to also think about collateral damage that's going to happen. So when we have that acute rapid onset, you wake up, like you feel like you've been hit by a bus, I don't know what to do. This is generally what we see with cold and flu. This is where, we want to have something work right away. But we also see the other end of it. We have that chronic, long-term kind of like, oh God, I'm just sick all the time. I always feel low energy. I don't ever feel amazing. That's where maybe we want to think about more preventative, building back up immune system for that person who's generally running low. And your body's actually really smart and does a really good job of telling you when you should be listening to this. So our brain and our immune system actually kind of like co-evolved at the same time. And so for our survival, right? If back in the day, if let's say you were sick and you're supposed to be at home resting, right? Because that's, again, you could take all the supplements and all that in the world. We have to think about those pillars. If you were really, really sick, your body is supposed to be saying to you like, hey, you should probably be like shutting it down right now and go to sleep. I'm not going to give you energy to go out and hunt. So if you've been chronically sick for a very long time, again, we have to think about building that back up, resting, getting our immune cells to respond quicker, as opposed to there's a time and a place for that uh-oh focus. We're being like, okay, I need to feel better right now. And so this is another way to think about it, and you can explain it. And there's a lot of debate over this right now, like germ theory again versus terrain theory. So I'm not a parent, but if I was, or I remember when I was a kid, we had like birds. So I'm going to use this, not an example for birds, but for fish. Like if you were a parent and you gave your kid a fish as a pet and the fish kept dying, I think at some point the parent would, instead of maybe like just replacing the fish when the kid is asleep, they would say, hey, Brianna, I don't really know what's going on. Your fish keeps dying. Let's talk about the health and the state of how your fish is living. Are you feeding it enough? Is the water clean? Are you changing the water, right? So if your fish bowl, quote, is dirty, you change the water and you clean the tank. So again, we don't want to always just have short-term approaches. So like, yes, you can certainly take things when you don't feel good, but you have to understand that if we don't get to the root of the problem or the condition of the water, then we are going to keep having the same problems over and over again. And so this goes back to the whole idea of just because you're exposed to a germ, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to get sick every single time. We have to build up an immune response. So this is really important as well to calculate your risk. So again, not every single time you're exposed to a bacteria or a virus that you are going to get susceptible to it. So it's a lot like compounding interest. And I want people to start having this conversation in their head as well and think about kind of what's going on. And this is also where comorbidities can be important. So let's take a step back. Exposure size, right? So how much of the virus or bacteria are you exposed to on a daily basis? If you're somebody who literally never leaves their house and they don't talk to anybody and they don't interact, and maybe you went out one day, are you being exposed to it a lot, right? The dose makes the poison. If you're a healthcare worker maybe, or you're still working in an office, or you're working at the store level and you're being exposed to people, your exposure is going to be a little bit higher, right? So that might be a little bit different of approach and maybe multi-layered. Maybe you have your pre-season herbs and botanicals that you're building up with, but you want to also maybe keep some of those game day things like the oil of oregano, like sinus blaster, like black seed oil, right? Those things that are going to come and they're going to show up. Then we have to think about how severe is the virus, right? So this is what we're seeing now with Corona. It's apparently, you know, very contagious. People can get it very quickly. And then we have to think about the susceptibility. So like your overall immune system strength, or I've talked about in the past, kind of like your foundation, right? So if the foundation of your health castle is very weak and there's, you know, leaky floors and, you know, it wasn't laid properly, then you probably are going to get more sick. Or again, susceptibility. If you're somebody who already has diabetes, or you already have an autoimmune disease, or you're going through something really emotional in your life, that can also make you more susceptible and your risk might be higher. So again, you might have to take a more aggressive approach to titrating up more effectively. Or again, starting your preseason, some people can maybe start it at the end of the summer. You might have to start it sooner than that. But we don't want to just keep blaming the germs, right? So just like how flies, if you have flies in your apartment, that doesn't cause garbage, right? They feed on the garbage, but that's not necessarily, if just because you have the flies there doesn't mean that there's going to be garbage. So just because there's a germ present, it doesn't mean that you're absolutely going to get sick. There could be a lot of other reasons in your life that you're getting sick. Again, back to those foundations. Maybe you're not sleeping enough. Maybe you're eating a lot of sugar. Maybe your inflammation bucket is really high. Maybe every time that you are sick, all you're doing is taking a short-term approach, and so then you're not building back up the foundation every time, right? So maybe you're super stressed. Maybe your air quality in your house isn't good. So you can't just keep saying, I have to kill all the germs and I have to kill all the bacteria. That's why a lot of the formulas that we have, this is also why I love all of our mushroom formulas and things like that, because we want to think about systemic kind of team effort, right? The immune system, even if it's not killing bugs and bacteria, it's always working around the clock. It's doing other things. So if you walked up and there was a burning building and you saw the firemen there, that doesn't mean that they caused the fire. So just because we have germs going out, we have this, crazy virus happening, that's not the only reason people are getting sick. So we have to also be aware of that. Everything else that we're consuming in our lives, thoughts, people, food, supplements, all of that can add to what's going on with our overall health. And so I've talked about this before, but again, being kind of the king and queen of your immune system castle. So you want to think of your body as the castle. If the castle is in really bad shape, it's going to be a lot easier for invaders to get in. And what we see sometimes with people is that the castle looks really beautiful. They might physically look really well, right? But inside, it's a hot mess, right? Like it's like, the windows are broken, the floor hasn't been replaced, there's damage inside. So we have to also think about not only the exterior of what's going on, but also the interior. And so the state of your immune system is your whole castle, and we have a couple of defenses before we actually get totally sick. So this is, again, when we should start listening to our body, sickness behavior, right? If we start to feel tired or we feel lethargic or we feel like that, listen to that and then say, this is maybe an acute need that I need to pay attention to. So just like a white knight is going to come in and it's going to slay the dragon, we have white blood cells that come into battle anytime that there's like a sign of trouble. And so when this happens, we have to think about, is this really the time for me to necessarily be fixing my immune castle? This is when there was like a lot of information and mixed information about cytokine storm, right? Cytokines inherently are not bad. They're cell signaling molecules. They tell your cells what to do. They're produced anytime there's inflammation in the body. But if you're already super inflamed, or your inflammation bucket is full, or your stress bucket's full, or your immune system is overburdened, it's overworked, and it's not getting enough time off, it's not getting enough of those foundational needs that you need, then you're going to probably feel way worse and you're going to be in a negative. So it's not always the best time. That's why certain things like astragalus are better a little bit pre-season and long-term and don't necessarily always work acutely. So like, if your castle is being attacked, that's probably not the day to send out the mason guy and say, hey, can you come fix the door? You want to do that after everything is calmed down. So again, thinking, is this an acute need? Is this preventative? Am I taking more of a long-term approach? Do I need something fixed right now? Again, because your immune system is working all the time. So when we're thinking of the castle, we have a bunch of these different things, right? We have our skin and our mucous membranes. That is step one. This is maybe when you start to notice that your mucus, you're producing more of it. On a good day, we produce about like 1.5 liters of mucus. If we are sick, we're going to produce more, because what that does is it's going to try and trap the bacteria and get it out. Then we have that internal defense system going on. So this is when we start to see phagocytosis happening. This is why we want to take things like echinacea at the first sign, elderberry at the first sign, because what that actually does is it increases that process, circulating neutrophils, phagocytosis, that little munching up right away. That's that second defense, so we don't have to worry about the third defense, which is, again, that's like the Navy SEALs of your immune system. That's your acquired long-term immunity. That's, you've seen this germ before, you've been exposed, and your body knows how to deal with it. That's what actually produces things like antibodies, which are like your B cells and your T cells. And so again, I want to make it, really clear that even if you're not sick, right, you might be listening to this webinar right now and you're like, I never get sick, I'm fine, it's good, but maybe you had something really stressful happen in your life, or your diet hasn't been great or whatever, and maybe you're just not functioning as optimally as you want. Your immune system is doing a lot of other things, right? So it's going and it's surveillancing tissues in the body, it's clearing out dead debris. So this would kind of be like if you finished a work assignment ahead of time, and it's, let's say, 10 o'clock on a Tuesday, you're not going to be like, well, I'm done working for the day. There's a good chance you're going to be like, well, maybe I'll get ahead of this project and I'll do this now too. So we have to think about, maybe you're not always, training that innate, you don't always need that kind of uh-oh phase, I need to fix something right now, but maybe you should start saying to yourself, well, how do I actually respond when I get sick? When I get sick, do I bounce back quickly? Are there other areas of my life that affect me when I get sick? Like I've shared with you all before, I'm very susceptible to, if I don't sleep enough, I will get sick guaranteed. So for me, that's something that, you can try and focus on as well. And again, your immune system is like always on alert. And Mitch has definitely said this before. I love this quote too. When you're thinking about building your health first aid kit, you don't wait until you're bleeding to buy a Band-Aid. So you want to have certain things around. So this is, again, where we're going to go through a bunch of SKUs right now and talk about what things should I be keeping in my house, again, because who knows what's going to happen over the next couple months, again, if people are going to be afraid to go outside or whatever. And then I want people to start understanding how to break down different parts of the immune response as well. We have, again, some things that are going to be more long-term, right? More of that preventative approach. We're in our pre-season. We got to boost that immune system up, build a nice, strong immune response. And then we have those immune stimulants. That's game day, that's fast acting, it's short term. We're not going to be using it forever. So we might have a couple of different immune first aid kits that we're going to have ready, or be able to have this conversation with people on the floor as well. So for example, this is when I was talking to Mitch about this, he was saying like he will use echinacea in very large heroic doses if he feels like he's going down or he's been exposed to something. So he can use that in an acute non-tonic way, tonic meaning a very long time. But so you'll see at the end of this slide when I send the handout, he will kind of categorize some as preventative, as some as tonics, right? And some as acute. Sometimes there's a crossover between all of them. There's not necessarily like a set religion with this. I want people, again, to understand their own individual immune system, depending on all those other factors we talked about and their pillars and their biological terrain and all of that, depending on what immune SKU might be best for them. So you might not want to be killing everything all the time. You might not want to be overstimulating your immune system all the time. You might be getting sick because you're such a spaz and your inflammation is so high and your immune system is overreacting. You need to calm things down, right? You've got a lot of heat in the body, your excess, as they would say. So these are just some of the immune SKUs to kind of, you know, be aware. We have a lot of really great mushroom SKUs. We have single ones. We have some formulas now. We have things particularly for the upper respiratory tract. We have things that can be kind of really deep tonic, like the lymph tonic. The ImmunoWell RX is like one of Mitch's favorite and mine as well. That can be really good for kind of building up immunity. I kind of take those all year long. And then again, some of those heavy hitters like the oregano oil and the golden seal, right? Like those are things that when you wake up, like I'm really glad that I have them in my office for when I need them. So again, immune modulators, this is things that are going to be long-term. This is pre-season stuff. And so the word tonic is kind of thrown around a lot, but what that means, and from Mitch's standpoint, it's a long-term thing, right? This is a long-term relationship. This is not a fling. We're in it for the long haul. So this is very much so for those chronic issues, that kind of chronic burnout. There's a lot of weakness in the body. It's not necessarily going to be working effective immediately. So you can't expect for you to be beating your body up and all these other things and then take ashwagandha for 2 days and feel better, right? You have to really be committed to this. This is also for people who are just generally have immune weakness. Maybe they have autoimmune issues. And again, because what they do is they work almost secondarily like as adaptogens. They work on your hormones and they work on your immune system and they kind of help, you know, to balance things out. Then we have our immune stimulants, right? So we can sometimes use immune stimulants for a really long time, for a super short time. Some of them are used as tonic. Some of them can be used as a preventative approach, and some of them can be used acutely, because what they do is that they help that body in that initial uh-oh phase. I don't feel great. They increase phagocytosis, so they make more white blood cells. They go and they munch up all the things that aren't great for us. They help to balance out things like the cytokine production and how cells actually communicate as well. So this is if you maybe have been exposed to something recently, you are traveling, you have traveled, you're around somebody who you know is sick. So this is kind of those short-lived effect, right? And you have to re-administer those pretty frequently. So you might be doing that every 2 hours. So this is sometimes where our liquid veggie caps might be a little bit better because you're getting a more bang for the buck. You're getting a more concentrated dose, or you don't want to have to keep taking a tincture bottle. So that's something to think about as well. And then again, I did a whole webinar on this, but secondary immunity. So you're helping your body adapt to stress, right? Because if you are stressed because of, it doesn't matter, right? It's not sleeping, overexertion, nutrient deficiencies, whatever it is, stress because of you're stressed about money right now and the security of your job and people's health, media stuff, like that's tough on the body. And again, your body is just always, your immune system is secondarily responding to your central nervous system. So it's really important as well to be taking these adaptogens for a very long time. You're going to be in a long-term committed relationship with those as well, because that helps to kind of balance things out. It's kind of like your safety net, right? Where it can, you know, like I said, kind of calm you down and everything else. And so Mitch has talked about this too, like depending on what's going on, you might have deficiency. So if you're somebody who is sick all the time, you maybe want to think about, again, building back up immunity. But if you're somebody who's already hyper immune active, you might want to calm things down. And again, you can use any of these things as tonic. Some of them can be preventative. It's all going to be individual. So there's not a one size all fits conversation, and that's why just one immune SKU is generally not enough for people. Sometimes you might have to change it up as the seasons change, or as you change, as your acquired immunity changes throughout your life. So that is really important to think about as well. So if you are a deficient person, we want to think, okay, this is that person. It's probably what somebody like me looks like. Super pale, just like bags under their eyes. They're tired all the time. They kind of look like weak. They're just super deficient. When they get exposed to a germ, I used to be like that. I used to get strep throat twice a year, like guaranteed it was happening, right? I've worked really hard to build up my immune system. So I need to be very aware of my preventative approach. So I take our Mushroom Immune every single day and our ImmunoWell RX. These are really great for that pre-season, building things up. Again, really good for, before cold season, again, if somebody gets really sick, and just supporting that whole immune system. Because again, our immune system is things like our lymphatic system, our tonsils, our spleen, all of that kind of stuff as well. Then we have, again, somebody who's maybe deficient, but they're working on it, and they maybe just need that little extra boost. So they need an acute setting, right? They need that game day heavy hitter. They're coming up, they're that cleanup batter. They're guaranteed to hit a home run every single time, right? So that deficiency, those are going to be some of our SKUs, like our oil of oregano, our sinus blaster, our congesties. When you take these, you feel them pretty effective immediately. Congesties, I love so much. I mean, I've heard people call it herbal mucinex, because it's really great if you have that runny, wet situation going on. Again, because viruses can, take 3 to 5 days. And what a lot of these formulas, particularly, they target the sinus and the throat and the lungs. And generally when it starts in the nose, it will drip down into your throat, and then you get a sore throat, and then you could have a wet cough. And so it's really important that we're supporting our mucous membranes, which is a part of the immune system, the upper respiratory tract. And again, with these acute herbs, we're going to want to take those like every couple of hours. We got to really be on top of it, and even longer than the symptoms present. So I'm guilty of this. I will, be really diligent about it for a couple of days, and then I feel good by day 3, and I'm like, oh, I'm fine. I don't need to do this. No, you need to keep doing it, right? You need to keep doing it for a couple of days after, maybe even a week after. So again, when your immune system is being attacked, or when your immune castle is being attacked, that's not when you just give up, right? We have to start building that back up as well. And then these are just some definitions actually from our herbal monograph book. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, because I am sending out a handout, but I want people to be aware of some of the verbiage around what it means to use certain botanicals at different times. So depending on what's going on in the body and the state of your tissues, if you're somebody who's, really mucousy all the time and really hot and inflamed, you don't want to necessarily add something that's going to add more heat to the body, or, more gel-like substances. You might need an astringent. So this is also why we have different protocols for different kinds of things. So antiseptic herbs, right? This is if, you have maybe some kind of infectious organism growing on. So things like garlic are really good to keep on hand. Echinacea, golden seal. Again, a lot of these, oregano oil, propolis, when we have that phase, you've recently been introduced to something, you titrate this every few hours, really good. Again, not necessarily going to always build up immunity super long term. You can definitely take them in smaller doses, but these are going to be that more heroic dose. I need you to be all in right now. Again, we have our immune stimulators. So this is really important because it's going to increase that immune function. So it's going to produce more circulating neutrophils, more white blood cells, more of those first immune responders. So Echinacea, astragalus, reishi, right, myrrh, wild indigo, those are going to all be things that are really good as well if you've maybe been kind of deficient, or your immune system just not as trained as it should be. I cannot speak highly enough about lymphatic support. Lymph system is so important, particularly because we have like 500 to 600 lymph nodes throughout the body, and that is what is processing out all of this stuff. Our lymphatic system produces things like lymphocytes, which is the source of our white blood cells. So it goes and it traps bacteria. That's why when you get sick, like where you have lymph nodes, it gets swollen. So lymph tonic for me has been like a game changer. I take that all year long. I have that on my dad. My dad's on that all year long too, because he has like circulation issues, and he's somebody who actually has comorbidities. He has cardiovascular issues. So for him, if there's not good circulation going on, if he's not getting the things out of his system, then he's going to have a really hard time filtering out his blood, right? Because the immune system is your lymphatic system and your blood. So that's going to be really important. So other things, you'll see these in some of Mitch's other formulas, but like red root and Stillingia, echinacea even can be really good for the lymphatic system. But the lymph complex and lymph tonic is like one of my all-around favorites to keep, especially if somebody is very like immune compromised. And then again, if somebody is autoimmune excess, right? So everything's running at 1,000% all the time, maybe they need to calm things down. This is very important to talk about too, like expectorants, right? So expectorants and demulcents, you may maybe hear these words kind of thrown around. And so again, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I do want the jargon to become more familiar. So expectorants, they help to expel out mucus that you might have. So if you're like coughing a lot, right? Mucus is very thick. Mucus is super helpful, but if it's getting stuck in our body, like if you have like a stagnant pond, that attracts flies and it can attract like mold. That's what's kind of like happening internally. So we want to thin that mucus out. We want to get it out and moving. So things like yerba santa and Osha, licorice, wild cherry, a lot of these single botanicals that you could take as a single botanical, but we also have in a lot of our respiratory formulas. We have some of these things in like our sinus formulas as well. Again, that's going to help make sure getting that mucus out. And again, that mucus is what traps the bacteria. Adaptogens, we talked about this. Mitch always says overall, these herbs are the most important remedies for maximizing systemic health. So the serene mushroom support and the stress mushroom support, I think right now during everything that's going on, even our stress ease formula, these are three of my favorite. I keep all three of these at my desk, again, because they work on that limbic brain, that emotional brain. And again, our immune system is secondarily responding to the central nervous system. Our central nervous system deals with our brain, right? Our brain and our spinal cord. So really important that we're taking these for a very long time. Again, we're in a super long-term committed relationship with these adaptogens. And then I just wanted to touch a little bit on respiratory tract health, particularly because of things like the smoke that was happening and the wildfires. I sent out a newsletter, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, and I also have a post on our social media page about this. But again, treating the respiratory system, depending on if it's the upper respiratory system or the lower respiratory system, if there's a lot of mucus going on, if there's like a lot of hot mucus, if it's something that's cold and you have like a dry cough, there are very different protocols. So this is also why sometimes somebody can take a formula and it works really great for them and somebody else can take it and it doesn't. So this is a screenshot of the email that I sent out a couple of weeks. This is also on our Instagram and Facebook page. But again, the physical structure of your lungs, right, that's going to be really important for your respiratory health. But how we breathe and what we breathe is going to be really important. Some people right now don't have the choice. I know the smoke has recently cleared, but some people don't have the choice to work on that. So formulas for our bronchial and respiratory tract, right? Maybe it's irritating your eyes and your nose. Some people maybe are more sensitive to that, your throat and your lungs as well. So we have things like the Sinus Blaster and the Resparease liquid, Osha bronchial syrup, throat spray, and the Congesties are all, I think, really good conversations to have. And then again, formulas to support stress. Even if you weren't going through the wildfires, I think everybody is on a heightened stress alert right now. So Kava, Stressies, Adrenal RX, again, these are things you can take daily to balance things out so our immune system is secondarily supported. And then of course, Osha, which is like Mitch's most favorite botanical ever. This is going to be really helpful again because what this does is it helps to actually stimulate macrophages and white blood cell production. It can be used preventatively. It can sort of numb sore throats. It can bronchodilate, so it can like help you breathe deeper if you have any lung congestion. I sent out our newsletter, I believe it was this month. Osha was our herb of the month. And so Mitch was actually on the board for funding the first ever sustainability research on wild harvesting any botanical. And it happened to be Osha, which is Mitch's favorite botanical, because there is a lot of hearsay about it doesn't grow back and the sustainability isn't great. And they did this study for 5 years and they found that about 2/3 of the Osha grows back. And if not, it grows back stronger. So if you didn't receive that newsletter too, let me know because I can send out the link that has that, a little bit more about Osha, as well as Mitch actually being on the board for raising money for that research. But Osha is in a lot of our formulas. Again, it's really good for the lungs, stimulating white blood cell production, helping you breathe more, lung congestion. And again, so the Resparease and Congesties are all going to be, really helpful for that. And then I'm going to kind of just go through these. You can, kind of read these on your own time. But again, depending on what kind of cough you have going on, and I want to just touch on this again because particularly COVID is dealing with the respiratory tract. That is said to be more of a dry, kind of irritating cough. This is maybe where something like a relaxing expectorant might not necessarily be amazing, or depending on what's going on. So if you're having a lot of spasms going on, like you have that very hot, dry condition, your throat feels very raspy, which is like what's happening with me right now. I'm talking a lot. These can be very soothing and calming. They can cool, they can moisturize stuff. So things like lobelia and marshmallow, licorice, these are all things that can coat the mucous membranes. That's going to be really good if there's a lot of like, dryness happening. We have decongestants as well. These work really well on the upper respiratory tract. So things like horseradish that's found, like in our sinus blaster, yerba mansa, which can be in like our congesties, even things like chamomile. So all these things that maybe are a little bit more warming and spicy, they can help to drain out extra mucus in the body. Then again, antitussive. So this is like if we have a lot of overreaction in the respiratory system. So wild cherry bark is really popular for that, and lobelia. So again, things that are found in like our respiratory complex. And then again, demulcents. This is really important, I think, for people to know. If you're somebody who is like you have a lot of like boogery stuff going on, you got a lot of mucus happening, that's very a wet condition, they would call that. You might not want to add more things to the body that's going to make stuff more wet. So things like marshmallow root, licorice, slippery elm, sometimes you might need something that's a little bit more astringent in property, that's going to dry things up. So again, very important to be aware of what kind of immune response you're happening. Again, if you're very boogie and very runny and all that, you might want something that's more astringent, like yarrow or a congesties formula, even things like goldenrod, right? Goldenrod is blooming everywhere right now. So this is, again, works really well if that's like you're kind of have like a lot of leakage going on. And then again, relaxing, kind of antispasmodic. So you're coughing a lot, you kind of can't calm down. Anxieties, relax formulas, and then even things like lobelia can be very helpful for that. And then the rest of these slides you'll see that are going to be sent out. So Mitch kind of breaks down all of the formulas as far as primary, preventative, acute, and so this kind of goes into that. So it's broken up by liquid veggie cap, fresh ground veggie cap. So just some more reminders of what some of our actual immune SKUs are. If he's using that and thinking about that more as a primary kind of thing, that's like his first thought. Some again can fall into that whole primary and secondary, so they work preventatively and acutely, right? So this will be really cool, I think, for you all to be able to see that as well. So hopefully this will be helpful. If you have any other questions, again, feel free to rewatch this. I will be sending this out later today, as well as the handout. And I hope you're all staying healthy and working on your 4 pillars of health. And I'll see you all for next month's webinar.